innovation in making it big. Please join me in welcoming our guest speaker. Please join me in welcoming our guest speaker, Padma Bhushan Mrs. Suchitra Ella, Joint Managing Director and co-founder of Bharat Biotech, past chairperson CII, Indian Women Network and Women Empowerment National Committee, in conversation with Rhea Mazumdar Singhal, Nari Shakti Puraskar winner and CEO EcoWare. Mrs. Suchitra Ella co-founded Bharat Biotech in 1996, and today, Bharat Biotech has given the world Covaxin, the first vaccine for COVID-19 to be fully developed and manufactured in India, along with the Indian Council of Medical Research. However, the company has been making waves in the world of vaccines for a really long time, with remarkable vaccines against hepatitis B, swine flu, and the Zika virus. For Mrs. Suchitra Ella and Bharat Biotech, innovation always takes priority. In conversation with Mrs. Ella, we have Rhea Mazumdar Singhal, awarded with the Nari Shakti Puraskar, the highest civilian honor for women by the President of India. She is a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader, India, and chairperson, Indian Women Network, CII, Northern Region. On returning from UK, Rhea founded EcoWare with the sole aim of solving India's plastic menace. EcoWare disrupted the food packaging industry by introducing a fully compostable alternative to plastic made from the waste of agricultural crops that would otherwise be burnt, leading to air pollution. Rhea has been featured in major national and international publications and has appeared as a speaker at various domestic and global events. Over to these two really dynamic and powerful people for a great conversation we are all looking forward to. Over to you, Rhea.
Thank you, Megha. Good evening, Mrs. Ella. Before we start, I just wanted to say that this is a bit of a fangirl moment for me. I am a pharmacologist turned entrepreneur, and it is an absolute honor to moderate this conversation with you. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Rhea. First of all, you can call me Suchitra. I'm probably one of your super seniors at the Indian Women Network, going way far back in 2013 when we founded it in the southern region in Chennai, and thereupon later on took it across the country and made it now an all-India initiative for women at work, for career women, for all professional and career-oriented women. I'm extremely happy to be with you guys this afternoon. Go on, Rhea.
So, Suchitra, I want to ask you, how did you get started in your industry? And if someone wants to enter this space, what are the 3 pieces of advice that you would give them?
Oh, how did I get started? We moved back from the US in 1996, 98. That was our transition. The reason I say we is because my husband and I are partners in life and also partners in the business. I wouldn't say partners. I give it a kind of a human connect, and I always have said this. I've been quoted. He's the brain of the company and I'm the heart of the company. And that's how it was almost like bringing up a third child when we wanted to become entrepreneurs. We both first generation entrepreneurs, had no business acumen or skill set at that point of time. And both of us, of course, having trained and worked in the United States. He is a molecular biologist. Krishna is a molecular biologist. Completed his postgraduate, his PhD, his graduate program in molecular biology at Wisconsin, and further moved on to become a research fellow and a research faculty at the NIH, at the Medical University of South Carolina. So this was the overall technical background. And I studied economics from the Madras University and went to the US with nothing else but economics in my hands. And I didn't know software and I didn't know no programming or any of the languages that were talked about in those days to get to the United States. And here I am thinking, what do I do with my economics background in a country that is as alien as the US. To me, when I was that young, I was under 30, or 25, maybe early 25, mid 25s. And I said, okay, fine. I could think of marketing. I had a good communication skill set, which probably came to me from my schooling onwards. I had some amount of risk-taking abilities. I had a lot of courage. I was quite bold enough to dabble into anything or plunge into anything. So I said, hey, why not try marketing? Because, it's business development, marketing. I mean, these are all extensions of the commercial operations of any organization. So that's how I got into a kind of a area of commercial operations. I was in financial services back in the US. My entire career there was built on the fundamentals of relearning all these aspects of the commercial aspects of businesses back in the US for about close to 13 years before deciding to come back to India. The thought for coming back to India was very natural. It was nothing pre-planned or pre-programmed or well thought of over 5 or 10 years long. It was just taken in a matter of not even maybe a year's time to understand that we had the courage to go back. If we did go back, we felt that we were both debarred from applying for, especially Krishna, for any of the government research positions or academic positions. And there was no research in the country, in the private sector at that point of time that was happening, that was interesting to him at his level of science. So we said we got to do something ourselves and we got to get, self-employed, become entrepreneurs, try it out, make or break, we'll have to give it a shot. So that was the passion with which we came back. And also if we could bring useful, immensely useful technologies in the medical space, in infectious diseases, in therapeutics, in vaccines, which were extremely high cost at that point of time and were not being made in India at all. I mean, we were importing vaccines and biotherapeutics from the multinationals. So it was also extremely cost prohibitive for a majority of the populations that we have in countries like ours. So this was, I know it's a long answer, but it's still fresh in my mind when I can, when I think about it. It was so passionate and deep dive into entrepreneurship.
No, that is absolutely amazing. So I must ask you, because I work with my co-founder as my husband, and I often feel that it's not, there's no textbook on this. There's no module in an MBA school or, that teaches you how to work with your spouse. And I'm just trying, so there's the laugh. I'd love to know and deep dive into that a little bit more about how the two of you have made it work.
I guess once we decided that we are moving back, there was no looking back at all. Moving back to India, relocating, there was no looking back. Yes, we have had ups and downs. I mean, it's a part of life. As you said rightly, there's no chapter anywhere in any book of economics or book of business or book, whatever the theoretical books that are around there, with due respect to all the academia that we have around us. There's nothing that prepares you for this kind of venture that you want to, you're bold enough to get into. See, the purpose brings us together, Rhea. I think that's important. Passion brings us together. That's very important. Commitment to the purpose is very important. And sometimes to understand that it's okay to fail is also important, because as an entrepreneur, like, when you start, as a startup entrepreneur back then for us, there was no guarantees. Again, there was nothing written in the financial books anywhere that anybody would guarantee success. And neither did we know ourselves if our technology or the platform or the process, the project, whatever you call it, would even succeed at that point of time. India was averse, the system at that time in India was averse to almost everything that was new technology or the sunrise technologies, anything that was research based, technology based. I mean, people were still thinking that it's the old, brick and mortar kind of businesses that would have to thrive. And, the hardcore industry in terms of manufacturing and mechanical and engineering. But this was life sciences we were talking about, and people were a little skeptical about it as well. So, but anyway, in order to be, I think, as co-founders, first of all, we needed to know how not to get onto each other's foot at the office. We worked from separate buildings, blocks, offices, whatever you call it. Though we didn't have a lavish office or anything like that in the beginning stages, and even to this day, we are quite moderate in the way we operate and look at things around us. We also knew that the strengths we had and how we could use those strengths to complement each other. And it was good that both of us were not PhDs. I think it would not have worked if I had a PhD too on my head somewhere. So I'm glad I'm not a PhD. And I think I could just listen to all the science that was being talked by Krishna and the group of scientists. And I could learn from them, of course. There's so much to learn always, and you just have to be a sponge and you can absorb. And I would bring in my share of contribution or support in terms of all the administrative functions, Rhea. When you are a young startup company, today we are 25 years later, I probably have enough verticals in the organization which is headed by an independent professional. He or she is quite, extremely competent to run their respective departments and respective areas of work. But when we were a startup and the first 4 years, without a revenue model, literally I wore the cap from being the administrative manager, the finance officer who wrote a check, or the marketing person who could call and ask somebody, the HR person who was hiring people. You name it. Going looking for real estate to see what kind of an office space we could have in the city in order to have a small office so that people, bankers and other, investors would have to come and meet with us. So I did all those things. So it was kind of like all rolled into one. But I think the important thing is that we need to know our strengths and we need to complement each other. I think if that can be understood from the beginning, yes, there will be small areas of differences because we have never worked with our spouses. We live with them at home, and that's a family setting and that's a social setting. And, it's different with the kids around and, we are spouses. But when we start working together, yes, sometimes, the ego gets into on the table or somewhere in a discussion or something like that. So I think it's a give and take. It's a give and take. It's just the same as you are a spouse or in a family or with any other family member. I'm sure even with siblings, if they are in the business with us together, I think all of them are, will have equal, if not almost equal competencies, but there is always a space that we have to be aware of that needs to be, not, that space has to be left alone for them. And we need to back off. We need to know when we have to back off and give everyone the space. And I think that's probably what's worked. And above all, I don't know whether it was destiny.
That is amazing. No, I think all the entrepreneurs, and I think listening can resonate from your initial days of being the internet fixer, the chai wala, the driver,
The telephone
delivery
operator too.
person.
Somebody would have
And
ever thought that Suchitra Ella doesn't know how to pick up a phone on her EPBX board line. I know that too. I have done it. So I mean, you're an entrepreneur. You just have to leave no stone unturned. And there is no such thing. And even the small group, the team that you have around you at that point of time, in those first few years of breaking it even, the first 5, 7 years of organization building is not about, it's just, it's dignity of labor and everybody has to do everything kind of a thing. I mean, yes, there are focus areas, but almost on a routine basis. I would go to the telephone office and there were no cell phones in those days. So I'm that old and you can understand the era I'm talking about. So I had to go to the telephone department to apply for the landline connection. So, you have to do it. That's it.
Yep, I couldn't agree more, and I completely resonate with the fact that when there's shared commitment and shared passion, that any conflict is constructive conflict, as I'd like to call it. So
And as
everyone.
long as, Rhea, we don't bring it back home. I think
Yeah.
that's important. I think we need to also understand that this is, human error or human, I mean, all of us are not perfectly made, and we are not the perfect solutions to everything. But I think if we know how to separate work and home, and then we are fine. So we don't carry baggage from office to home and home to office. We just have to become like a split personality for the right things, of course, and go about it.
No, that's those are definitely some words of wisdom for sure. So I have to ask you, I mean, the last 2 years for a lot of businesses, have been about survival, and now we obviously have this war looming as well, right? Um, and I guess my question as an entrepreneur is how do you go from hustling and your everyday hustle to creating stability? And how important are agility and innovation in that process?
The last 2 years since the pandemic broke out, I think that's a bigger war. It's a bio war. It's a biological war that I think the whole world is facing. I just returned from New York yesterday morning. I'm less than 24 hours in India. And if you catch me dozing off, that's my jet lag. But I don't think I will. I just came back from New York. I said that because there was a high level debate at the UN organized on 25th of February in order to understand how we need to augment our resources across the world, across continents, in fact, the rich and the poor nations, in order to be equitable in terms of bringing out solutions, healthcare solutions to the world community at large. Because today we know that the richer nations can afford vaccinations, and the poorest of the poor nations depend on donations to get themselves vaccinated. And we know that because we are in that space, and we know the kind of procurement that happens for 70 plus of the poorest countries of the world. This is done by UNICEF. They procure vaccines, and these vaccines are distributed to all these countries who just cannot afford to buy their own vaccines to protect their own children and adults. So this has been a very traumatic time frame for all of us, irrespective of the industry that we come from or the areas of the sectoral focus that we come from, the businesses that we come from, whether it is small, medium, large, or whatever be it. For me, the toughest part was that because we were working in a pandemic, while most of us or most of the world and the country was shut down on March 23rd, our organization, my own organization, did not shut down because we had to be at work, and we came under the essential services. My first thought was, how am I going to take care of the 2,000 odd employees in just one campus? And we had at that point of time two other campuses, one in Bangalore and the other in Ankleshwar in Gujarat. So I was concerned, my first thoughts were that. So it was very important to take care of our own employees, their welfare, their families' welfare, because everybody was affected by this terrible news that was just trickling on to us. All of us were shutting down, going into cocoons and, not wanting to face the, issue or really running away from it. Socially, everybody was telling me that we sent off our staff, our offices are shut down, we are not going to work, and so on. And I'm mopping my floor and doing my dishes and cooking my food. And here I am just doing the opposite. I'm traveling to work 150 kilometers every day to be at the plant, to be at the facilities in order to keep everybody's morale and be a source of support to every one of them there, because it was important, because we needed to be on the facilities physically. We don't have a work from home concept, at least in the biotech life sciences. And also in manufacturing, R&D happens physically in the labs, and manufacturing happens physically in the GMP facilities 24/7. So there is no stopping of the shutting down of the facilities or any of the systems that are in the cold rooms don't get shut off, for example. The HVAC systems don't get shut off. So these kinds of things, they're process equipment. It runs 24/7. So importantly, what I would like to say was that, and then also, plus the next big question was the information about the virus was trickling down. We being in the space of developing vaccines, we've done viral vaccines, we have done bacterial vaccines, we have done recombinant-based vaccines. So we've done a whole bunch of vaccines. But that's in normal times. It took us 10 to 15 years sometimes to develop a vaccine. Vaccine development is not a joke, it takes forever if you're lucky. If you're lucky, you have a timeline of about, say, 15 years or 20 years and under to develop a vaccine. If you're not, you don't know where it would stop, when it would stop, at what stage or point of progress that it would stop, because there's so much of regulatory and biological and technical issues connected to vaccine development, because we're dealing with natural organisms, and it's important. There's a lot of things that we need to show in terms of product development and safety in animals and safety in human beings, clinical trials, product development, and regulatory norms of the country itself and international agencies. So here we are trying to manage to manufacture 12 different vaccines for children, starting from polio to rotavirus and a typhoid vaccine. And then this thought process of what are we going to do about this one, which has just struck us like really like an atom bomb. And the world is, we know where the world in terms of technology is. The United States is the strongest in terms of biosciences and life sciences. Europe is almost neck to neck with them. And that's about it. And the rest of the world is probably, not even in the top 10 in terms of technology building. There's China and there's Russia, but again, I don't want to talk about them at this point of time. So we don't know how much, what kind of knowledge sharing would take place with them. So we said we need to do something independently, indigenously, and innovatively for our own country, for India, because also the thought process came, which struck us again, was another huge bombshell that this is not a pediatric vaccine that I'm talking about or my organization is talking about. We know the pediatric vaccines and most adult vaccines. We know the cohort of the country, which is, roughly about 25 million births in a year. That's the pediatric children's doses. And then we know what the adult vaccines are. So no, we kind of can, map the whole requirement of the country and also the international markets that we cater to. So which is quite done comfortably at our levels of operations. And there's no rush and push behind it because it takes a year to supply. They have their timelines and the supplies go on. The government of India procures from us. So we know that there's many international agencies that procure from us. Many governments procure. But this one is another killer. It was 1 billion. It's a population of a 1.3 billion, including the kids under 18. And where do we go for 2.8 billion, almost 3 billion doses of vaccine? And in 1 year's time. So we kind of said, my God, this looks absolutely undoable because it looked like that. But then we said, let's start it. We have to start because we can't be thinking of that, the end point now, and then give up and use that as a point of reference and then say that, no, we don't have the wherewithal to go ahead. So we just said, write to the Ministry of Health. We wrote to the ICMR and we just said, please give us some SARS-CoV-2 strains. That's all we asked for from the Ministry of Health because the ICMR, one of the labs in National Institute of Virology in Pune was the testing center, the testing laboratory for the SARS-CoV-2 strains as they started arriving in India in the months of March and April of 2020. So we wrote to them because we needed these strains to start developing. And we did not have the mRNA technology in our country because mRNA technology just didn't happen overnight in the US as well. As I said, these countries work on innovation, new technology building for years to come. And millions of dollars get into this kind of technology building in Europe and in US. So I think we need to catch up with them, but at the same time, we didn't have access to the gene sequence. When they got it, they could jump ahead and they started working on it immediately. It is still a synthetic gene sequence that the mRNA vaccines have used in the US. And because they also did not get the live sequence from China, or they did not wait to isolate it from any of their infected patients in the United States or in Europe at that point of time. So they just jumped on to a synthetic strain. They understood the gene sequence and they developed the synthetic strain, and then they used the spike protein to tweak it and then deploy the synthetic strain into it, which could, then multiply itself and start reproducing and making, and be used in scale-up operations to make millions of doses of vaccines. Our technology was exactly the opposite. We did what is called the classical technology. We looked at, this is exactly what vaccines like polio and Japanese encephalitis. We use this technology in about at least a half a dozen vaccines that we have already manufactured and are in different stages of development at our own facilities here and with our collaborating partners around the world. We used a classical method. We brought the virus from Pune and we entered our facilities. My colleagues entered the facilities with a live SARS-CoV-2 vaccine. SARS-CoV-2 virus, not having a vaccine for it, not being vaccinated for it. There was no protection whatsoever that they all had, except the BSL-3 containment facility, which works under a negative pressure. And they had their suits, which was protecting them from any of these contamination that could happen in a production facility of that nature. So that is how this entire process started. We inactivated it. We then started growing the virus. This virus is grown in thousands of liters. It is killed or it is inactivated. Either word could be used. And then it's formulated with an adjuvant, which is another small compound which holds on to that inactivated cells in the same state for a shelf life of 6 months to a year, or even 2 maybe, when if extended, so that the consistency and the quality of the vaccine doesn't deteriorate for that entire shelf life. And then we had to substantiate it with animal trials to show that animals don't die. So there were the first animals that were injected were rats, guinea pigs, or mice, because they are the first ones who take the brunt of a new potential vaccine candidate before it can be even tested on humans. So these are innumerable challenges which we had to cross over, not having any textbook knowledge of. We had knowledge of building vaccines over 15, 20 years for a single vaccine, but trying to make a vaccine in 12 months and under, it was nightmarish. It was 24/7 operations. I personally have stayed in the offices and the plant for more than 12 hours, if required, or even close to 15 hours, in order to just ensure that we had our act together and we had all of us almost marching towards the same goal that we all hoped that we would try and reach out in making a vaccine for India. That is how this journey started. So I think this tremendous, I think that there was, the important fact is that everybody showed up to work. Nobody said, none of our staff, the employees, right from the bottom to the topmost levels, never complained of coming into work. I think it was a sense of pride for them when the Prime Minister came and said that you have become our heroes in developing this kind of technologies that countries like ours would need to be indigenous and to also be innovative in that process, so that our dependence on the international community becomes less due to the enormity of the 2 billion doses of vaccines that are required to vaccinate our country. So that's how this journey began. And I think it was impossible to have been achieved if any one of our collaborators, we had the ICMR partnering with us, we had the NIV do animal studies, we had 25 medical hospitals and institutions across India doing the product development and the clinical trials, in 1,000 volunteers, human volunteers, during all the 3 phases of the pandemic. And our own marketing colleagues in the country, the entire country, were all positioned in different states and in different regions to enable this entire process. It was like we were in bunkers for 2 years, and then we wanted to get that product out with quality and, of course, with international standards, because that's important. Ultimately, we were not making a vaccine for India. We knew that from day one, that we wanted to make a vaccine which would stand the test of international regulatory norms. That's important.
This is, I mean, absolutely amazing. And I wish we could carry on this conversation. And I know that I literally have just 30 seconds with you. So one last question is,
sure.
What advice, you've spoken so passionately, obviously, about something, your life's work. So that's amazing. But my last question is, what would you, really quickly, what advice would you give your 25-year-old self?
At 25, I was a career woman. Little did I know that I would become an entrepreneur later on at some point in life. So go ahead, do that part, learn the skill set, assimilate all the information that you need to. Do it yourself. And you have to roll up your sleeves, and you just can't expect others to keep teaching you, or get practical, get on the floor, and go do it yourself. Get into wear multiple hats. I think a career, building is not about focusing on one area of science or economics or finance or marketing or whatever be the faculty that we are interested in or we are basically trained in. But I think building a career is about how you are like a jack of all trades and master of one kind of a thing. That comes to my mind all the time, because we need to roll ourselves up in many avatars, if you call it, or wear many multiple hats. At different points of time, the organizational requirements change, and these changes have to be also quite easily adaptable in us, so that we are able to reach out to the organization when the organization needs us. So I think go ahead, do that learning process, maybe for 5, 7, 10 years. It can be different from person to person. And if you have to become an entrepreneur, you have to dive at it. There's no ifs, there's no buts, there's no questions, there's no guarantees, there's no warranties. Just dive into it. You make it or not, it doesn't matter. Enjoy that journey as well. And then you'll come out of it, and even if you fail, you can write a book about it as to how you failed or what went wrong, so that you can tell somebody that don't do this, and you wouldn't fail, and at least you would, you'd be able to show some kind of a little, pathways to a few out there who probably would use it or have some takeaways to learn from your failures. So I think it's okay. Like I said in my opening statements, it's okay to fail. I think success is not the ultimate goal for any organization, however large or small we can be. I think it is sustainability. At the end of the day, the organization has to sustain. All the stakeholders have to be sustained. That's important.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
So proud of your work, Suchitra. Sorry to jump in like this, but I had to take the chance and had to take the one second to say how proud we are of your work.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarita. Lovely seeing you. Thank you.
Megha, over to you.
Thank you, Mrs. Ella. Thank you, Rhea, for that wonderful interaction and sharing of such valuable insights. Thank you so much for that session.
You're welcome. I'm proud to have been, I'm very honored to have been a part of this discussion. Like I said, just like some of the other my own organization that I felt nurturing and building over the years, IVEN is one such organization that I'm very passionate about, including the symbol that you see on the screen, the colors that come up over there, the bright maroon and the gray, the shades of gray, and the Indian Women Network, the name tag that it got, and Women Matter. Everything was done in a year's time by a beautiful bunch of women at the southern region. For a year, it took us to brainstorm and come out with this beautiful organization. And I hope the Indian Women Network will have a great way going forward in bringing more and more women and younger women into this institution by itself. And I know under the CII banner, we can do it all together. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.